When Liam Hanley came back to town, I could tell things had changed. He was previously engaged to my wife, Sarah. They were close until he suddenly ended it to marry a wealthy woman who was 10 years his senior. Sarah had always been open about how heartbroken she was after the breakup, which happened just a year before I met her. As a police detective, I'm naturally cautious. I didn't want to get too involved with Sarah if there was a chance she'd still be drawn back to her first love. I did some research on Liam, which was pretty easy given my job. Detective Evans, I heard as a young officer approached my desk. I replied, glancing at her name tag. Jordan, what are you working on, Theo? My partner, Mike Brennan, who's a third-generation cop and one of the sharpest on the force, asked. He's one of the few people who knows I'm looking into my girlfriend's ex-fiancé. I replied, raising an eyebrow. Do you think she's cheating on you? Not at all. I just want to make sure I'm not caught off guard if he ever comes back and sweeps her off her feet. Just be careful, Mike advised with a smile. The captain doesn't like it when personal files end up on your desk. I brushed him off and opened the envelope. As Sarah had told me, the contents were exactly as I'd expected. Liam had married Catherine Weaver, a local financial advisor. Empire. They had a daughter together, and aside from a few traffic tickets, Liam's record was clean. He worked as an advisor for Catherine's family firm, Weaver Financial Group, which managed billions. I also got some info on Catherine. She was an only child, educated at Ivy League schools, and had no criminal record. I had a feeling everything was above board, so I decided to put my concerns aside and let Sarah and I continue dating. A year later, we tied the knot, and shortly after that, we had a daughter, Emma. Overall, things were pretty good for the first 18 years or so. We had the usual ups and downs and minor disagreements here and there, but our relationship was rock solid. Sarah was an only child, and she was a bit stubborn at first, but she learned to control her impulses over time. Our daughter Emma became the center of our world, especially mine. Recently, though, there have been some changes in our relationship. We were drifting apart, doing fewer things together while still maintaining a close relationship. The passion we once shared started to wane. It was like an old, comfortable pair of shoes that had lost its shine. I still loved Sarah deeply and I valued the life we'd built together, but things weren't quite the same when Emma left for college. Sarah's mood took another turn. I now worked as the chief of detectives, overseeing a quiet county with a low crime rate. My hours were pretty manageable, and Sarah still worked part-time. She'd been working as a dental hygienist for a while, but I could tell something was on her mind. Then, about a month after Emma left, Liam showed up again. Sarah and I were at a barbecue hosted by some mutual friends, Tom and Anna, who were closer to Sarah than they were to me. Tom and I got along well, given his background in security. I hadn't expected Liam to show up, but Sarah's reaction told me all I needed to know. She pulled away from me early in the night, making her rounds among the guests. About an hour later, I found her on the porch with Liam. As soon as she saw me, she blushed, and I could tell she was a bit nervous. Sarah introduced me to Liam, downplaying their connection, but I had a feeling this would lead to trouble. I tried to keep my cool, using my training to handle the situation as calmly as possible, but something about the whole interaction bothered me deeply. After that night, we started seeing Liam at events pretty regularly, and it seemed like each time was more and more of a coincidence. I sensed that Sarah would want to discuss something soon. One morning, after a rare moment of intimacy, she turned to me with a nervous expression and said, "Theo, I need to talk to you about something. I'd like you to hear me out before you react." I tried to prepare myself, but I was already feeling nervous. She went on, "You know that Liam was my first love. We were engaged until he met Catherine, and we broke up. Now that she's gone, he's feeling lonely. Theo told me he still has feelings for me. I have to admit that I still have feelings for him, too, but I love you too." The room seemed to spin as I tried to stay calm. Sarah took my silence as a cue to keep going. "Liam and I discussed it, and we thought that maybe I could spend a week with him, a week with you, so I don't have to choose." I got up, got dressed, and left the office without saying anything. I sat there for hours, going over the proposal again and again. It was the most selfish thing I'd ever heard of. She wanted to keep us both, and I wasn't okay with that. When I finally got home, I wasn't surprised to find Liam's car in the driveway. When I got home, I found them sitting together in the living room. Sarah tried to say hello, but I shot her down, making it clear that I was upset. We need to have a chat about this. She began to speak, her voice betraying her nervousness. There's no need to discuss this further. I replied firmly. You're either with him or you're with me, but you can't be with both. Liam tried to come across as reasonable. He added, I'm not trying to take Sarah away from you. She'll still be your wife, just with a little extra support from me. I was close to losing my patience. The way he put it, like I should just accept this messed up situation, was infuriating. I turned back to Sarah. Do you really think I should share my wife? I don't agree to this, and that's final. Sarah, who was on the verge of tears, pleaded with me to consider it. She reminded me of her loyalty over the years and how she felt about both of us. I couldn't help but snort in frustration. Liam, do you think you would have accepted this if Catherine had suggested it? He smiled and said he would have been fine with it if it made her happy. But I knew he wasn't being truthful. I turned back to Sarah. If I come home with a similar request, would you be okay with that? She took a moment to think it over, then replied, if it made you. I let her know that I'd be reaching out to a lawyer and that they both needed to leave. Sarah was in tears as she turned to leave, telling me that the door was always open if I changed my mind. I tuned her out and started getting ready for what was to come. I made a list of everything I needed to do, from hiring a lawyer to dividing our assets, while making sure our daughter Emma's future was secure. I found it really tough to tell Emma. She was really upset, calling her mother names and saying she'd never speak to her again. I tried to calm her down and explain that Sarah was still her mother. I could tell that Emma was really upset and that it would be tough to calm her down later on. Sarah called to ask why Emma hadn't been answering her calls. I told her that Emma needed time to process everything. Sarah got pretty upset and said that I was turning our daughter against her. I just replied calmly, saying that I was trying to be of assistance. The days just kept on dragging by as I continued with the divorce proceedings. I was lucky to have Sally as my lawyer. She was known for her straightforward approach. She was a huge help to me. It was a bit of a misguided approach on my part. She took my case on with complete loyalty, having known me from cases where I'd helped her clients without hesitation. Sarah and Liam tied the knot shortly after our divorce was finalized, which was a breeze thanks to Sally's thoroughness. Liam tried to force a buyout of my share of our home, but I found a way to get the upper hand. I leveraged the help of local appraisers to inflate the property's valuation. Liam ended up paying a pretty penny, and I moved into a new condo, hoping to leave my past behind. A few months went by, and I gave dating another shot, but every encounter made me realize how draining relationships could be. I just wasn't feeling it, and I wasn't looking to get into another serious relationship. One evening, I was having dinner. I was at a restaurant when Sarah suddenly showed up and came over with a tentative smile. She said she missed me and would welcome me back if I ever changed my mind. I got a strange satisfaction out of seeing her still longing for what she'd lost as we spoke. I noticed Liam glaring at us from across the room at his table. The sight of him gave me a bit of an idea. I ran my plan by Emma later on. After she got over the initial shock, she laughed and told me to go for it. The next day, I gave Sarah a call to talk about the idea of a new arrangement, just like the one she'd suggested months earlier. She was quick to agree and set up a meeting at our old house. When I got there, it was obvious that Sarah hadn't told Liam I was coming. He looked a bit tense as I sat down with them. He seemed really happy when I first mentioned the idea, but Liam's reaction was pretty priceless. He went from surprise to visibly angry in a heartbeat. "Hang on a second," Liam interjected. "We need to discuss this first, but you agreed before Sarah brought it up." I'd managed to unsettle him, and I couldn't help but laugh as I walked out. The next day, Sarah called to say that Liam had agreed to the arrangement, but he wanted us all tested for any potential health issues first. I agreed, and before long, Sarah and I were back to spending time together, with Liam having to accept the arrangement he'd once pushed. As time went on, it was clear that Liam was getting more and more resentful, while I was enjoying my time with Sarah. It was evident that their relationship was becoming increasingly strained. In time, I saw that my plan was working better than I'd expected, but the final result was still unclear as time passed. The tension in Liam and Sarah's relationship became more apparent, though Sarah continued to split her time between us. I could tell that this was starting to wear on Liam. He'd been pretty confident, maybe even a bit smug, about their arrangement at first, but it was turning out to be harder for him to handle sharing Sarah than he'd thought it would be. When I picked Sarah up each week, she seemed increasingly unsettled. On the surface, she was trying to act like everything was fine. Liam was okay, but I could see the strain. He was acting pretty cold lately, and he'd often give me the eye from the doorway as I took Sarah. It was clear that the arrangement, which he'd originally come up with, wasn't working out for him anymore. After a few months of this, things finally reached a breaking point. One afternoon, I arrived at their house and found them in the middle of a heated argument. As I pulled up to their house, I saw Liam and Sarah in the front yard, arguing with neither willing to back down. As I got out of the car, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction at the scene unfolding before me. "You guys might want to calm down," I called over with a smile. "Or someone's going to have to call the police." Liam shot me a look that said he was really frustrated. "Stay out of this, Theo," he said firmly. Then he turned back to Sarah and said, "If you go with him, we're done. I'm not doing this anymore." Sarah looked at him, taken aback. "Liam, you were the one who suggested this arrangement in the first place. You said you were okay with it." "I was wrong." "Okay, I was wrong. I can't move forward without another word." He stormed back into the house and shut the door behind him. The house. Sarah was still reeling from the outburst as she slammed the door behind her. She turned to me, looking a little sad and confused. "He's just upset," she said, almost trying to convince herself he'll come around. "Everything will be back to normal." But that didn't happen. The next few days were quiet on Liam's end. By the middle of the week, Sarah gave me a call. He told me he'd moved out. He was serious about it. He was finished with the arrangement. It seemed like he was asking her to move in with him. She said, "Liam's gone. I've come to understand that I made a mistake. I just want us to go back to how things were." "Theo," I took a deep breath. The satisfaction I'd felt earlier was gone. I said, "I'll come pick you up on Monday, just like before, keeping my tone even, but I want to come home to you full time, Theo." She said, her voice breaking, "I messed up big time." Liam's proposal to share was just a way to break us up, and I fell for it. "Please, let's go back to how it used to be." There was a brief pause as I let her speak. After everything that's happened, I couldn't deny that part of me had once wanted this. But things had changed. I'd gotten used to the distance and the independence. What she wanted now wasn't what I wanted anymore. "Well, Sarah," I began, feeling a bit embarrassed. "You never really wanted me on your team full-time. You wanted me to share you, remember? I've gotten used to just being a part-time dad. My husband is going to pick me up on Monday." There was a moment of silence on the other end during the week, followed by the sound of her sobs. I could tell she was struggling to find the right words, but I'd already made up my mind. After everything that's happened, I couldn't go back to how things were before, and I couldn't forget how she'd forced me into this situation. After a few tries, Sarah's voice came back, quiet and strained. "Yes, Theo, I'll be ready on Monday." I ended the call with a strange mix of emotions. In a way, I'd come out on top, but it didn't feel like a victory. After years of love and trust, our lives had changed in ways neither of us could have imagined. When I got to her house on Monday, I saw Sarah standing outside a small suitcase. Her face was drawn, and her eyes looked empty. I could tell the reality of her choices was weighing heavily on her, but I'd already made up my mind. I rolled down the window and looked at her for a long moment, letting the silence grow. "Sarah, I love you," I finally said, my voice steady but firm. "I thought I could make it work. Time is a factor, but I've come to realize that I deserve more than half a life with someone who couldn't fully commit." She looked taken aback.